The world tilted for Jedediah as the dirt clod crumbled, revealing the glint of gold. A wedding ring, under his porch, and etched on it, clear as a branding iron on fresh hide, were the initials, a mother's initials. A cold dread, heavier than any winter storm, settled in his chest. His ma, bless her soul, was never married. Never. He gripped the ring, the smooth metal suddenly burning against his calloused palm. This wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a ghost whispering secrets he wasn't sure he wanted to hear. The scent of dry earth and pine needles always brought a quiet peace to Jedediah Cooper. His ranch, nestled in the jagged embrace of the Sierra Nevada foothills, was his sanctuary, his inheritance, and his burden. He'd spent the better part of his 30-odd years mending fences, breaking horses, and chasing the sun across his land. This morning, however, started with a different kind of chore. The porch steps had seen better days, and a loose board threatened to trip up anyone foolish enough to forget its temper. Jedediah, with his usual methodical calm, had pried it up, dust motes dancing in the morning light. That's when the glint caught his eye. He knelt, his broad hand reaching into the cool, dark earth beneath the floorboards. It wasn't a coin, nor a forgotten nail. It was a ring. Gold, simple, and weighty. His thumb traced the ornate cursive. His mother, Alice May. A sharp, almost physical blow hit him. Ma had always been a solitary woman, her life a tapestry woven with threads of hard work and quiet resilience. Talk of men, of love, of marriage, it was absent from her stories, from her very presence. She'd raised him alone, a fortress of a woman. This ring buried like a secret sign, shattered that carefully constructed image. Jedediah stood, the ring a strange, cold weight in his hand. The familiar creak of the porch, the distant lowing of his cattle, the chirping sparrows, it all felt alien, observed through a haze of disbelief. He walked to the edge of the porch, staring out at the expansive, sun-drenched landscape that had always been his solace. Now, it felt vast and indifferent, holding its own secrets, just as his porch had. His oldest friend, Silas, a man as gnarled and wise as the ancient oaks on Jedediah's property, was due to ride in later to help with the branding. Jedediah usually looked forward to Silas's company, his dry wit a balm to the soul. But today, a knot of unease tightened in his gut. Could he even mention this to Silas? The thought felt like a betrayal to his mother's memory. The ring pulsed with unspoken questions. He had a choice: bury it back, pretend it never existed, and preserve the peace. Or dig. And Jedediah Cooper, for all his quiet nature, had never shied from a challenge, especially when his past called. He closed his fist around the ring. The digging had to begin. The sun climbed higher, baking the already dry land, but the chill of the ring in Jedediah's pocket remained. Silas arrived, his horse a dusty apparition on the horizon, leading a string of fresh mounts. Silas, with his weather-beaten face and eyes that had seen too many sunsets, dismounted with a groan. "Mornin', Jed. Looks like this heat's gonna boil the brains right out of us." Jedediah grunted in agreement, but his mind was elsewhere. He led the way to the corrals, the familiar smell of horse and leather a small comfort. As they worked, branding the new calves, the rhythmic clang of the iron and the protests of the animals filled the air. Jedediah found himself watching Silas, trying to find a crack in his old friend's calm demeanor, a hint that he might know something, anything, about a past his mother had kept hidden. But Silas was just Silas, focused on the task at hand. Later, over lukewarm coffee and stale biscuits in the dusty kitchen, Jedediah finally broke. He pulled the ring from his pocket, setting it on the scarred wooden table between them. "Silas," he began, his voice rougher than he intended, "I found this, under the porch." Silas picked it up, his brow furrowed. His gaze, usually so sharp, softened as he read the initials. "Ma," he murmured, then looked at Jedediah, a question in his eyes that Jedediah couldn't quite decipher. "Your ma?" "Hers," Jedediah confirmed, the single word heavy with unspoken meaning. "She was never married, Silas. You know that." Silas put the ring down, his eyes distant. He took a slow sip of coffee. "Things ain't always what they seem, Jedediah. Some folks got reasons for keeping things close." He paused, then looked directly at Jedediah. "Your ma, she had a past before she settled here. A life. Don't go digging where you ain't got a shovel big enough to handle what you find." The quiet warning hung in the air, a thick, palpable presence. It wasn't just a suggestion. It was an obstacle, a wall Silas was putting up. Jedediah felt a surge of frustration, a burning need to know. "What do you mean, a past?" He pressed, his voice tight. "She never spoke of it." Silas shook his head slowly. "Some stories ain't for tellin'. Not by me, anyway." He stood, pushing his chair back. "Looks like that branding is gone not take all day if we do and get back to it." He walked out, leaving Jedediah alone with the ring and a new, unsettling realization. Silas, his steadfast friend, was holding back. And the silence, as much as any spoken word, communicated a danger Jedediah hadn't anticipated. He had lost, for the first time, the easy trust he had always shared with Silas. The sun beat down on Jedediah as he rode, leaving the ranch behind. Silas's words, heavy with unspoken warnings, echoed in his mind. "Don't go digging where you ain't got a shovel big enough." But the more Silas held back, the more Jedediah felt compelled to uncover the truth. He needed answers, and the only place to find them was where his mother had come from. He rode east, the familiar plains gradually giving way to rockier, more unforgiving terrain. Memories of his mother, sharp and vivid, began to surface, blending with the stark landscape. He saw her, bent over the stove, her hands calloused but gentle as she kneaded bread. He remembered her quiet strength, how she'd fix a broken fence with a stoicism that defied her slight frame. But there was always a sadness in her eyes, a shadow that he, as a boy, hadn't understood. Now, he wondered if the shadow was this secret, this buried past. A specific memory, like a dust devil rising from the parched earth, swirled into his thoughts. He was no older than 10, sitting on the porch swing as his mother read from a tattered book. A traveling peddler had passed through, and when he saw Jedediah's mother, his eyes had widened, a flicker of something. Recognition? Fear? Crossing his face before he quickly looked away. Later, Jedediah had heard the peddler ask a neighbor in a hushed voice, "Isn't that Alice May?" His mother had simply pulled him closer, her grip tight, and said nothing. At the time, it had meant nothing. Now, it felt like a crucial missing piece. He rode for 2 days, the silence of the wilderness a constant companion, broken only by the creak of his saddle and the rhythmic beat of his horse's hooves. He skirted the edges of small, dusty towns, each one feeling like 100 others. His destination was a place marked only on an old, faded map his mother had kept tucked away in a trunk, a place called Blackwood Gulch. It wasn't on any recent maps. A ghost town, if it was anything at all. As he pushed further, the land grew more barren, the mountains sharper, the air thinner. He felt a deep ache in his chest, a mix of longing for the simple life he'd left behind and a growing fear of what he might find. This journey wasn't just about a ring. It was about his mother, about the very foundation of his life. And he had to choose: turn back, let the secrets remain buried, and live with the gnawing doubt, or push forward into the unknown, risking everything to unearth the truth. His heart urged him forward, but his reason whispered warnings. He chose the heart. The skeletal remains of Blackwood Gulch emerged from the dust, a testament to faded dreams and forgotten lives. Crumbling adobe walls, the husks of what were once homes, and the weathered sign of a saloon leaning precariously. It was a graveyard of ambition. Jedediah dismounted. The silence here, heavier than any he'd known, broken only by the wind whistling through empty window frames. He found him in the saloon, hunched over a bottle, a man whose face was a roadmap of hardship and regret. "You looking for something, stranger?" the man rasped, his voice gravelly. "Alice May," Jedediah stated, his voice flat, every word carrying the weight of his journey. "Alice May Cooper." The man's eyes, bloodshot and wary, narrowed. He took a long drag from a hand-rolled cigarette. "Alice May. Haven't heard that name in a long time. Who's a skin?" "Her son." Jedediah's gaze was unwavering, daring the man to lie. A flicker of something surprise? Fear? Crossed the man's face. He set down his bottle with a clink. "Jedediah? Little Jedediah?" He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Last I heard, you two vanished like smoke." He introduced himself as Grifter Jim, a relic of Blackwood Gulch's boom days. Jedediah pulled out the ring, placing it on the dusty bar. "She was never married, Jim. This has her initials." Jim picked up the ring, his thumb tracing the his face hardened. "She was married, all right. To a man who didn't deserve her, a man named Silas Blackwell." Jedediah felt the blood drain from his face. Silas, his Silas, the man who had warned him not to dig. "That's a lie," Jedediah growled, his hand instinctively going to the Colt at his hip. Jim met his gaze, unafraid. "No lie, boy. Silas Blackwell, a real snake, ran with a gang of outlaws. Your ma, she was a good woman, always too good for the likes of him. She tried to make him leave that life, but he was too deep in. One day, things went sour, a robbery gone bad. Silas was shot. Folks thought he was dead. Your ma, she packed up, took you, and disappeared. Said she was going to make a new life, far away from all this. The world seemed to spin. Silas, an outlaw. His mother, married to him." A wave of betrayal washed over Jedediah, sharper than any physical pain. All those years, the quiet life, the unspoken sadness, it all made a terrible, devastating sense. His oldest friend, a man he trusted implicitly, was a ghost from his mother's past. A man who had lied to him, hidden the truth. Everything he thought he knew was crumbling. He felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. This was the moment everything was lost. The simple life, the unwavering trust, the very image of his mother. Jedediah rode hard out of Blackwood Gulch, the dust of the ghost town clinging to him like a shroud. The confrontation with Jim had left him reeling, a raw wound in his soul. Silas, an outlaw, his mother's husband. The man who had been a second father to him. The betrayal was a bitter taste in his mouth, eclipsing even the dried dust. He pushed his horse, ignoring the animal's fatigue, the rhythmic pounding of hooves, a counterpoint to the chaotic thrum of his own heart. He needed to get back, to confront Silas, to tear down the carefully constructed wall of lies. He stopped at a secluded watering hole, the quiet ripple of the water a stark contrast to the turmoil within him. He dismounted, letting his horse drink, and knelt, splashing water on his face. The cool liquid did little to quell the fire in his gut. He was physically and emotionally bruised, the journey and the revelations taking their toll. Even here, alone under the vast, indifferent sky, he wasn't truly alone. The silence was filled with his mother's unspoken past, Silas's hidden truths, and the crushing weight of his own sudden, profound loneliness. He was a cowboy, used to solitude, but this felt different. This was the isolation of a man whose foundations had been shaken to their core. As he rested, a glint from the edge of the watering hole caught his eye. He reached down, pulling out a small, tarnished silver locket. It was delicate, clearly old, and when he managed to pry it open, he found a faded, miniature portrait of a young woman, his mother, younger, her eyes full of a hopeful, innocent light he'd never seen. And on the other side, a tiny, almost imperceptible inscription, SB plus Ama. Silas Blackwell and Alice May. It was the final, undeniable proof, a cruel echo of the wedding ring. This locket, an element from the very beginning of his search, now took on a new, heart-wrenching meaning. It wasn't just a discovery. It was a ghost from his mother's true past, a past she had fled, carrying the heavy burden of it alone. A final dangerous thought solidified in his mind. There was a chance, however slim, that Jim was lying, that there was another Silas. But the locket, the ring, and Silas's own evasiveness all pointed to one terrible truth. He could turn away, let the anger fester, and simply cut Silas out of his life. Or he could face him, demand the full story, and risk the pain of unearthing even more bitter truths. He thought of his mother, her silent strength, her unwavering love. She deserved the truth to be known. With a heavy sigh and a renewed sense of purpose, Jedediah mounted his horse. The ride back to the ranch would be the hardest of his life, but he was ready. He carried courage and doubt in equal measure, riding towards the inevitable confrontation. The ride back was a blur of dust and grim determination. When Jedediah arrived at his ranch, the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of blood orange and bruised purple. Silas was on the porch, whittling a piece of wood, looking as settled and familiar as the ancient oak by the creek. The sight of him, so calm and unsuspecting, ignited a cold fury in Jedediah's gut. Jedediah dismounted, his movements deliberate, his eyes fixed on Silas. He walked towards the porch, the silence between them stretched taut as a new rope. He stopped a few feet from Silas and pulled out the ring and the locket, placing them on the railing, the gold and silver glinting in the fading light. "Jim told me," Jedediah said, his voice low, devoid of emotion. "Silas Blackwell. You married her. You were an outlaw." Silas dropped the whittling knife. His weathered face, usually so composed, crumbled. He looked at the ring, then the locket, then finally at Jedediah, his eyes filled with a pain that mirrored Jedediah's own. "Jedediah," he began, his voice raspy. I was going to tell you. Someday." "Someday?" Jedediah's voice rose, a tremor of long-suppressed anger finally breaking through. "My whole life, you've been here. A friend. A father to me. And all this time, you held her past?" Silas sighed, a deep, weary sound. "It was a different life, son. A life your ma wanted to forget. She was the best of us, Jedediah. She tried to pull me out, tried to make me see sense. But I was lost. When that last job went bad, when I got shot, they left me for dead. I survived, barely. But I knew I couldn't go back to her. Not with that life. Not with you." He looked at the locket. "She was my salvation, but I was her damnation. She deserved better than a man like me." He paused, his gaze meeting Jedediah's. "I watched you grow, Jedediah. From a distance, at first. Then I couldn't stay away. I came here, to this ranch, to be near her, to protect you both, without ever letting on who I truly was. She knew, in the end. We had a quiet understanding. That's why she kept the ring, I think. A reminder of what she escaped and what she chose to protect." The words hung in the air, a devastating confession. Jedediah felt the fury drain from him, replaced by a profound, aching sorrow. The man before him wasn't just Silas, the stable hand, the friend. He was Silas Blackwell, the outlaw, the man who had loved his mother, the man who had lied, and the man who had, in his own twisted way, been trying to make amends for a lifetime. Nothing would ever be the same. The image of his stoic, solitary mother, now intertwined with a secret love and a dangerous past, was forever altered. And Silas, the man who had sat by countless campfires with him, sharing stories and silence, was a stranger and a kin, a betrayer and a protector, all at once. Jedediah picked up the ring, then the locket. He looked out at the vast, darkening landscape, the ranch house, Once a beacon of unshakable truth, now a monument to hidden histories. He put the ring and locket back in his pocket. He turned to Silas, his gaze steady. "There's a lot of fences to mend, Silas," he said, his voice hoarse, "more than just on the ranch." Silas nodded, his eyes filled with a grief too deep for tears. "I know, son. I know." Jedediah walked to the edge of the porch, looking out at the last sliver of sun disappearing below the horizon. The truth had come at a cost, tearing open old wounds and revealing a complex, often painful, legacy. But in the shattered pieces, a new understanding was forming of his mother's strength, of Silas's burden, and of his own place in a story far grander and darker than he'd ever imagined. The outlaw's wedding ring had led him not to a treasure, but to the heart of his own tangled past, proving that some shadows, no matter how deeply buried, always find a way to the light.